I think fletchings are a very overlooked topic whenever it comes to building arrows. People usually just buy arrows with the fletchings already on them. They say, okay, that's fine, that's good enough, whatever they is. You know, most people don't even realize, they don't even know what their arrows are fletched in. You know, whenever you buy them at the store, is that fletched in a offset? Is it fletched in a helical? Is it a 1 degree, a 3 degree? You have no idea. What is going on, Predators? It's Travis here with Apex Predator Outdoors. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of a talk about fletchings. We got a lot of different fletchings here. And I wanted to say thank you to Odysee Vanes for sponsoring this video. It's not going to bias any of the opinions that I have or the options that I show in this video. The Odysee Vane system is the easiest fletching system that I've ever used. You just slide it on the arrow. You can put a little dab of glue on the end on there to make sure it doesn't move on your shaft. You have multiple different options as far as configuration. You can do different helical twists on there, and it actually does come in a helical. Some of the other brands out there that have this similar system do not come in a helical twist. Odysee Vanes are really great. They're easy to use and super durable. I've been using these for about a year now, and I just absolutely fell in love with them. And if you order from the link below or the coupon code I'll put at the bottom of the screen here, you'll get 10% off of your Odysee Vanes order whenever you order a whole box of vanes here, and you will get 2 free vanes in there as well. So if you ever happen to rip or tear one, you can just slide a new one on there and be ready to go back in the field. Go check out Odysee Vanes for yourself, and without further ado, let's do further. So I wanted to have a little bit of this discussion about just, you know, what is the influence and what is the purpose of vanes, because the goal of this video is to teach us in that series how to build better arrows and how to make our arrows fly better towards our target. So there's a lot of different variables that, you know, will change and will determine, you know, how good your arrow flight is. There's a lot of things like the you know, inserts, making sure that everything is tuned in the insert end of the arrow, making sure the nock is nock tuned and everything. But with all of that, you've also got to worry about what's controlling the flight of the arrow as it goes down range, and the main thing that does that is going to be your fletches. So there's lots of different types of fletches, lots of different styles and things like that. And fletches itself is kind of a generalistic term, meaning that, you know, if you're having these you know, plastic type vanes or a fob system, or if you're going back, you know, and you're shooting recurve and you're using feathers, there's still, like I say, they're all kind of generally called fletches. So the feathers had several interesting benefits. One is that they are very flexible. So if I push on this vane here, and any plastic vane, it will bend out of the way, but it requires a little bit of force. You can see it wants to spring back to its original position there. This is not ideal for something like whenever you're shooting a trad bow, unless you're using some kind of release or like a arrow rest on there. But typically if you're using a bare riser and you're trying to shoot around that riser with this is not the most ideal way to do it, because the plastic fletching is going to push that arrow away from the shelf, and that's not what you want. With a feathered arrow though, those feathers can easily be slicked back, and they can fold backwards so that whenever the arrow is passing around that arrow shelf, it's going to make sure that it goes around it with no interference. So there's that. So they're very lightweight. They work really well for recurve bows. The downsides to them is though that they don't quite steer as good, because they are made up of a whole bunch of individual small sections. You know, if you've ever really looked at a feather, it's got a whole bunch of individual sections along its length. And that also means they're not as durable. So if you hit a arrow with feathers through a target, it can survive for sure, but the odds of that surviving versus a plastic vane or plastic fletching is going to be much lower. All right. So now we move into, you know, the era of plastic vanes, where you've got you know, things like the boning blazer vanes, which are probably the most common vane on the market, and they're a really great vane as well. And you got the, the Boning Heat vanes, the AAE vanes, like the Max Stealth is one of the more popular vanes out there today. You've got these new tack vanes, you've got the Easy vanes here, and all these other things out there. And these vanes are really interesting because they're all very highly customizable, and they give you different weights and different sizes and different materials and things like that, as well as different shapes. And so this is kind of one of the things that a lot of people look at today, and they're like, what should I choose? What should I put on my arrow? And there's really a lot of different things to do with it. One of the things that you have to really look at, though, is what is the goal, okay? Am I steering a very lightweight, 350 grain arrow or something like that? Or am I steering a very heavy, like 600 grain arrow? Am I using a broadhead that's like a very small mechanical broadhead, or am I steering a very large single bevel broadhead? So that really and then essentially is what the main function of a vane or a fletching is to steer the arrow. So how much steering do you need is really what you need to determine. There's a couple different variables in that, okay? The first of which is how many fletchings do you want on there? Do you want 3? Typically you're only going to have a minimum of 3, obviously, but you can have 3, you can have 4, you can have 6. So those are probably some of the most common orientations, or sorry, the most common number of fletchings that you can get for your arrow. What is a good number? There's a lot of people who start asking. Well, again, there's a lot of variables, and so we're going to talk about that. So the overall factor that really is going to determine how much steerage these fletchings can impart upon the rest of the shaft of the arrow here is how much surface area they have. Alright, so I've got these on here right now. These are some of my favorite ones from Easy Vanes that I've used so far, and these are basically 65 millimeters by about 7 millimeters, okay? 7.5 millimeters. Right, so these are really good because I like them because they're low profile and they're longer, right? So they make sure that I have really good fletching clearance whenever I'm shooting past my cables and everything on my bow. But also they still got, I feel like they have a little bit less wind drift because they're not super tall. But there are other options out there as well. Now there are 4 fletches on this, okay? I could switch to something like this one right here. This one right here is a 3 fletch with a bit of a shield cut here. They are also a little bit longer, so I believe these are 75 millimeters long. Okay. Yep, 75 millimeters. They're about 10 millimeters high. So 75 millimeters by 10 millimeters, and this is a nice helical here. It's like a 3-degree helical. So I feel like these would do very well as well in flight. They're a little bit longer, but they're also a little bit taller. So this right here is going to have, if it were a 4 fletch, would have more steering capabilities than would this one, right? But really, it's all about the amount of surface area that it has on that fletching is how much it's going to steer. Now, let's talk about a little bit about that wind drift. So, I could be wrong. I would say I'm not a complete expert about this, but I think that the wind drift really has to do more with the profile of the vane here. Okay, so you can see with this 3 fletch, as I rotate it around, there's a little bit of a spot right here where it's not quite as tall as it is here in this profile. Okay, so it changes shape a little bit over and over, whereas the 4 fletch is pretty much, for the most part, going to be all the same height no matter which way I rotate it. So this right here is when, if you're talking about a crosswind and the wind drift, so the crosswind pushing the arrow off the path of the target, this is the profile that you're worried about. You're not really worried about this as much. This, like the rear or the front profile of the fletching, is really what you've got to worry about when you're talking about steerage and how much steerage that the vane can get. And whenever you're talking about wind drift, you really want to look at the side profile. So this is, again, this fletching here is taller. It's on both sides, so it's about 2 millimeters taller than the one over here. But it's also less fletching. So whenever the 3 fletch turns, you got a little bit of a part where it's shorter and it's taller, shorter and taller, versus the 4 fletch, which is pretty much consistent. So the way a wind drift works with these is that the 3 fletch, if you have a constant wind blowing at it, there's a possibility with the 3 fletch that it could do a little bit of this, because again, you've got a part where while it's spinning very quickly, you're going to have a part where there's more resistance and less resistance, more resistance and less resistance. So then again, that could cause a kind of a turbulent motion as it goes through. Whereas a 4 fletch is going to be pretty consistent. I've actually shot these exact arrows here, and I've seen with the 4 fletch with these exact vanes on there that sometimes what will happen is the arrow will still fly straight at the target, but then it'll kind of kick to the side. The back of the arrow will kick to the side, and it'll keep flying in that same direction because I got nice high FOC arrows. The arrow will fly again straight to the target like this, where the leading edge is still in the right spot, but the wind is blowing it sideways to the left. Whereas whenever I shoot with the 3 fletch, I've seen a little bit of a kind of this motion, and it's more so the back end, but what the back end does, the front end is going to do as well. So the next thing you're going to have to look at is going to be the degree of helical or the offset. So previously, if you watched any of my other videos, you saw that I shot these right here. These are the Zinger fletches, okay? Now the Zinger fletches here do not have a helical twist, okay? I don't know if you can see that or not. But they do not have a helical twist. They are just an offset vane. So basically, this right here is just straight but at an angle. Now if we look here at the Easy vanes, you can see that it's got a bit of a twist in it, so it kind of spirals up the edge of that right there. So what is the difference here? Well, the biggest difference is that a helical is going to have the ability to create a little bit more spin. So at this point right here where there's the kind of a cup from that curling of the vane right there, it's going to be able to grab more air and force it down the shaft of the arrow. So it's going to create more spin as it goes versus an offset here. The taller vanes are going to have a little bit more aggressive steering. So those are kind of the factors, and it's kind of hard to understand a lot of this because it's just so many different factors that go into making a really good vane setup. But here's what you got to think about. You got to think about what is the height of the vane. The height of the vane is going to change the amount of wind drift you have, as well as the initial steerage of it, right? So increased vane height is going to be an increased steering. The increased vane height is also going to increase the amount of wind drift you have. With a lower vane, like I say, you're going to have a decrease in wind drift, but you're going to have a slight decrease in steering as well. So if I'm shooting, like for this past season, I was shooting the crafted archery arrow 1, and those broadheads actually have a scoop in it to help it spin the arrow as it goes down range. So I didn't need anything super tall. I could get by with a much shorter vane here. All right, so that was why I chose these. They fly amazing with my field tips too. So I chose the longer vane because the longer vane is still going to give me a good amount of steering for my arrow, but it's not going to have as much of a susceptibility to wind drift as a taller vane. So quickly, I just want to talk real quick about the shape of the vane. So again, you've got several different shapes. You can have this kind of, I don't know what else to call that, but basically it's kind of like this is actually like a miniature version of the boning blazer vane, right? Kind of that boning shape, that blazer shape. Let's call it the blazer shape, right? So you've got these kind of shapes here. You've got this right here, which is I think referred to as a shield cut. Then you've got this right here, which is just a kind of a soft belly shape there. I don't know what you call that either, but you've got a lot of different shapes. And you got the wild Zinger fletches here, which really do good as well for their own right. But you got a lot of different shapes, and basically the science of these is really kind of not out there. I mean, there's not a whole lot of people that have done just like ridiculous amounts of testing with these. I know if you like watching the Ranch Fairy did do some testing on helicals and vanes and different fletchings, and found that between a 3 fletch and a 4 fletch and a helical versus an offset, that there really was not much difference in loss of speed. But it really comes down to more of just about how much steerage you can get, especially with a large broadhead on your arrow. So just kind of keep that in mind as well. But like I say, the shield cut's another one. There's a lot of different types, of different fletches here. And really the idea is whenever you have something like, I guess the most unique of these would be the shield cut. And with the shield cut, a cropping, like an outcut right there, cut out right there. And what that's supposed to do is supposed to help kind of reduce drag. You've got a slow, kind of gradual increase into the height of the vane here, and then you've got a drop off in the back, so it creates a little bit less drag, which the drag is basically like the only way that the fletchings, like a straight fletch, would be able to actually straighten an arrow. So if you didn't have an offset or a helical on there, then the only way it's going to be able to actually steer the arrow is by creating drag in the back and keeping the back end of the arrow behind the front end. Okay, so drag is going to be as a feature, I guess, built into every vane, that every vane is going to have some drag, but not all vanes are going to have that much. So anyways, with the shapes of the vanes, guys, like I say, this is all just a bunch of information just to kind of help you choose your vanes, and like, know that they come in different shapes and different styles, and they come in a left helical and right helical. You can order them in a 1 degree or 3 degree if you're using these types of fletches, or you can order them, or sorry, you can fletch them yourself in a 1 degree, 3 degree, 6 degree, whatever you want. Just know the main thing that you can take away from this whole video is what makes a good fletching: surface area. How much surface area do you need for your needs? So I'll probably be doing some more testing with this in the future, but I just wanted to sit down and kind of talk about this because I think fletchings are a very overlooked topic whenever it comes to building arrows. People usually just buy arrows with the fletchings already on them. They just say, okay, that's fine, that's good enough, whatever they is. Most people don't even realize, they don't even know what their arrows are fletched in. Whenever you buy them at the store, is that fletched in a offset? Is it fletched in a helical? Is it a 1 degree, a 3 degree? You have no idea most of the time. So that's why I encourage people to start buying bare shafts and start building arrows yourself, and making sure that you do this process yourself, because you go through the process, especially if you go through the process of tuning your bow and everything, you should go through the process of tuning your arrows and building your arrows in the same fashion. So thanks guys for watching. Again, if you like the video, like and subscribe down below. It just helps me out. It doesn't cost you a thing other than the little bit of energy of using your finger to hit that button. But anyways, thanks for watching, guys, and as always, keep defying the odds.